The dim hum of the colony ship's engines vibrated through the deck plating, a constant reminder that they were adrift in the void, light years from Sol's warmth. Captain Alara Voss gripped the railing of the observation deck, her calloused fingers tracing the worn metal as she stared at the starfield beyond the viewport. At 42 she was all sharp edges, short-cropped hair, a jaw set like forged steel, and eyes that missed nothing. She'd captained the Endeavour through asteroid storms and diplomatic standoffs with wary alien envoys, but this was uncharted silence. Beside her, Dr. Kai Ren adjusted his glasses, peering at a holographic display flickering with diagnostic readouts. Kai was the cautious one, his mind a labyrinth of probabilities and contingencies, always 3 steps ahead in theory but hesitant to leap. The fusion core's output is stable at 87%, he said, his voice steady but laced with that familiar undercurrent of worry. But the quantum entanglement relays are degrading. If we don't recalibrate soon, we'll lose contact with the forward scouts. Alara nodded, not turning from the stars. The Endeavour carried 200 souls, humans who'd volunteered for this push into the galactic rim, pioneers betting on humanity's knack for turning the impossible into routine. They'd left the core worlds behind 5 years ago, chasing signals from ancient probes that hinted at habitable worlds untouched by the sprawling alien federations. No grand alliances or wars here, just the quiet grind of expansion, one system at a time. But now, with the ship's AI reporting anomalies in the local space-time fabric, their isolation felt heavier, like a noose tightening in the dark. Footsteps echoed from the corridor, light and purposeful. Lieutenant Mira Torres entered, her engineering toolkit slung over one shoulder, grease smudged across her cheek like war paint. Mira was the spark in their trio. Witty, irreverent, with a laugh that could cut through panic like a plasma torch. She jury-rigged half the ship's life support during their last dust-up with a micrometeor swarm, turning scrap into salvation. "Heard you two brooding up here," she said, flashing a grin that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Core's purring like a contented cat, but the relays? They're throwing tantrums. Got a fix in mind, or are we improvising again?" Alara finally turned, her gaze appraising. "Improvising's our specialty, Torres. But this isn't a micrometeor." Sensors picked up gravitational echoes, something massive cloaked in the nebula ahead. Could be a derelict or worse. She straightened, the weight of command settling back into her shoulders. The challenge loomed. Navigate the nebula's turbulent fields without the relays, or risk the ship tearing apart under stress. Losing comms meant the scouts, 3 probes launched days ago, were ghosts, their data adrift. And with oxygen recyclers straining from a recent micrometeor breach, every delay shaved hours off their margin. Kai tapped his display, pulling up a simulated path through the swirling gas clouds. "We could reroute power from non-essentials, dim the lights, cut auxiliary drives. It buys us time, but the echoes suggest interference. Like the fabrics, folding." His brow furrowed, the cautious mind whirring. Mira leaned in, her fingers dancing over the hollow controls. "Folding? Sounds like a party we weren't invited to. Let's poke it with a stick. Send a drone probe to map the anomaly. If it's a wreck, we salvage. If it's trouble, we dodge." Her tone was light, but her eyes were sharp, calculating risks like odds in a high-stakes game. Alara weighed their words, the hum of the ship underscoring the quiet tension. They'd built this crew on trust. Her grit, Kai's foresight, Myra's ingenuity. But the nebula waited, a shroud of ionized purple and gold hiding whatever pulled at their hull like invisible threads. "Prep the drone," she decided. "Kai, run the sims. Mira, you're on point for launch. We adapt or we break." As Mira hustled out, toolkit clanking, Kai lingered, his voice dropping. "Captain, the projections. If the relays fail completely, we're cut off. No resupply, no backup. Humanity's reach ends here." Alara met his gaze, unflinching. "Then we extend it further." The stars beyond the viewport seemed to pulse in agreement, distant and unyielding as the Endeavour inched toward the unknown. The ship's hull groaned as the Odyssey punched through the outer corona of Epsilon Eridani's primary. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the armrests of her command chair, eyes fixed on the viewport where the star's fiery tendrils clawed at the reinforced glass. The crew had prepped for this leg of the journey months ago, but nothing matched the raw pulse of reality hitting you square in the face. Marcus, her chief engineer, slouched in the co-pilot's seat, fiddling with a holographic diagnostic panel that flickered like a hesitant flame. "Engines are holding, Cap," he said, his voice carrying that easy drawl that masked the gears always turning in his head. "But if this star decides to burp, we're dancing on plasma." Elena nodded, not taking her gaze off the swirling gases ahead. They'd come this far on human grit, pushing the Odyssey beyond the safe lanes charted by the Alliance, those skittish coalitions of species who preferred their explorations gift-wrapped with fail-safes. Humanity had walked first into the void, charting wormholes the others deemed suicidal. Now, with Epsilon's unclaimed worlds beckoning, the universe was starting to trail in their wake, envoys and scouts whispering about joint ventures. But Elena knew better. This was their shot to plant the flag before the crowds arrived. Lila Chin, the xenobiologist, emerged from the aft lab, her tablet clutched like a shield. She was the cautious one, always double-checking scans before committing to a hypothesis. "Captain, the preliminary data on Eridani 3 is off. Atmospheric readings show volatile hydrocarbons, but there's an electromagnetic interference pattern that's not natural. Like something's jamming our deep probes." Marcus straightened, his wit sharpening into focus. "Jamming? Out here? Could be solar flares playing tricks, but let's not bet the ship on it." He tapped a sequence into the console, rerouting power to the sensors. The hum of the engines dipped for a heartbeat, then steadied. Elena waited, her mind racing through contingencies. They'd lost a probe last jump, vaporized in a microsingularity they hadn't seen coming. No room for half measures now. "Helm, adjust course to polar orbit. Keep us high until we pinpoint the source. Marcus, isolate that interference. Lila, run a sim on potential biosignatures. If it's alien tech or a storm front, I want options before we commit to landing." The bridge fell into that familiar rhythm, the kind forged in late-night drills and shared rations. As the Odyssey arced upward, slipping free of the star's gravitational tug, a new alert chimed, sharp, insistent. On the main display, a shadow bloomed against the planet's ochre haze. Not a cloud, but a lattice of energy pulsing like veins under skin. Lila leaned in, her breath catching. "That's no storm. Spectral analysis matches nothing in our databases. It's structured. Artificial." Marcus whistled low. "Well, hell. Looks like someone's already throwing a party down there, and we weren't invited." Elena's jaw set. The challenge crystallized in her gut, not just the unknown but the risk of it unraveling their mission. Eridani 3 was supposed to be a foothold, a world rich in minerals and potential colonies free for the taking. If this interference was a rival claim, some Vorath scout ship or Krell outpost, it could spark the kind of interstellar spat that buried human ambitions under bureaucracy. Worse, if it was unstable, one wrong move and the Odyssey could join that lost probe in the cosmic scrapyard. "Full scan," she ordered, her voice steady as the deck plates. "And prep the shuttle. We're not turning back because of a light show." As the ship circled, the lattice below sharpened into view, a web of crystalline spires piercing the atmosphere, humming with power that made the sensors whine. Marcus patched in a closer feed, his fingers flying. "Cap, these aren't built by anyone we know. Energy signatures off the charts, could be a power grid or a weapon. And it's growing. Like it's feeding on the planet's storms." Lila cross-referenced her tablet, her caution yielding to quiet urgency. "If it's symbiotic with the hydrocarbons, it might be alive. Or evolving. We poke it wrong and it pokes back harder." Elena stood, the weight of command settling like an old coat. They'd adapted before, rigged sails from debris in the Oort clouds, outmaneuvered pirate swarms with nothing but momentum and math. This was no different. "Marcus, can we shield the shuttle against that EM field?" He grinned, the spark of ingenuity lighting his eyes. "Give me 20 minutes and a prayer. I'll bounce the interference back at it, turn their jam into our jam." The plan formed in fragments. Shuttle descent, pinpoint the lattice's core, sample without triggering a response. Simple on paper, deadly in execution. As the Odyssey locked into geosync, the star's light cast long shadows across the bridge, and Elena felt the pull of the unknown like a tide. Humanity had walked beyond reach once. Now the universe was watching to see if they'd stumble. Elena gripped the armrests of her command chair. The hum of the bridge consoles a steady undercurrent to the rising chatter around her. The view screen flickered with data streams from the sensor array, painting a chaotic picture of the nebula ahead, a swirling mass of ionized gas that their initial scans had pegged as navigable, but now screamed otherwise. Marcus leaned over his workstation, fingers flying across the holographic interface, his usual smirk replaced by a tight line of concentration. "Captain, the gravitic distortions are worse than we thought," he said, not looking up. "They're shearing the subspace layers like a bad knife through butter. If we push the engines any harder, we risk a feedback loop that could fry the core." Lyra Voss stood at the science station, her eyes narrowed behind her visor, hands steady as she cross-referenced readings. "It's not just the nebula. There's interference, patterns that don't match natural phenomena, like echoes of something deliberate." Her voice carried that measured caution, the kind that had saved them from more than one hasty decision in the past. Elena nodded, her mind racing through options. The Odyssey had ventured this far on the promise of uncharted systems, a human-led push into the void where no other species had dared. But now, with fuel reserves dipping low and the nearest relay beacon light years behind, retreat wasn't just impractical, it was a gamble they'd already lost. "Helm, adjust course to starboard, shallow angle. Marcus, reroute auxiliary power to stabilizers. We thread this needle or we don't come out the other side." The ship shuddered as the maneuver began, a low groan echoing through the deck plates. Alarms blared softly at first, then insistent as the first distortion wave hit. Elena felt the vibration climb her spine, the chair's restraints digging in. On the view screen, the nebulous tendrils seemed to reach out, violet hues twisting into sharper barbs. Marcus swore under his breath. "Reroute complete, but it's not enough. The field's compressing our hull integrity by 3% already." At this rate, a sharp jolt cut him off, the lights flickering as secondary systems strained. Lyra's console sparked once, her gloved hand slapping the emergency override. "Warp field collapsing. We're dropping out of subspace, emergency shutdown initiated." The Odyssey bucked violently, inertial dampeners lagging just enough to throw Elena forward against her harness. The view screen went dark for a heartbeat, then bloomed with stars, cold, unfamiliar pinpricks against an inky backdrop. They were through but not clean. The nebula loomed off the port bow, a receding storm, while ahead lay open void pierced by a faint, anomalous glow. "Status," Elena demanded, unstrapping and rising, her boots magnetized to the deck. Marcus wiped sweat from his brow, pulling up diagnostics. "Engines are holding, but we've got microfractures in the nacelles. Fuel efficiency down 20% from the strain. And comms, nothing. We're blind and deaf out here." Lyra turned, her face pale under the emergency lighting. "Sensors confirm it. That glow, it's a structure. Massive, artificial. Not human design. We're not alone." Elena's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice level. "Then we adapt. Marcus, patch what you can. Lyra, get me everything on that thing. We came to explore, not hide." The crew's eyes met hers, a flicker of resolve cutting through the uncertainty. But in the quiet that followed, the weight of isolation settled heavier than the stars outside. Humanity's reach extended, and now it had snagged on something vast and unknown. Captain Elara Voss gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening against the dim glow of the holographic display. The bridge of the Endeavour hummed with the low thrum of failing life support systems, air recyclers wheezing like an old man's labored breath. Outside the viewport, the asteroid field's jagged silhouettes loomed, a graveyard of rock that had snared their ship in its unrelenting pull. It had started as a routine survey mission, mapping uncharted fringes beyond Sol's reach, but now, with the gravitic drive crippled by a micrometeorite strike, routine had twisted into survival. "Status on the auxiliary thrusters?" Elara barked, her voice steady despite the sweat beading on her forehead. She was the anchor, always had been, cautious yet unyielding, the one who planned 3 steps ahead while the others charged forward. Beside her, Jax Harlan, the engineer, wiped grease from his brow with the back of his hand. his wiry frame bent over a tangle of exposed wiring, tools clattering in the zero-G drift. Online but barely. We're leaking Atmo from the lower decks. If we don't patch that hull breach soon, we'll be breathing vacuum in hours. Jax was the wit, quick with a quip even as sparks flew, but his eyes betrayed the strain, dark circles from sleepless shifts. From the comm station, Dr. Lena Kirsch nodded grimly, her fingers dancing across the interface. The xenobiologist's calm demeanor masked a fierce intellect. She analyzed problems like puzzles, piecing together solutions from chaos. I've got a signal bouncing off that big rock at bearing 247. It's faint, but it might be a relay buoy from the old colonial fleet. If we can align the array. Ilara cut her off with a sharp glance. No ifs. We need it now. The challenge wasn't just the field, it was the isolation. No backup from Earth command this far out, no rescue drones within light years. One wrong maneuver, and the Endeavour became another relic tumbling through the void, its crew's ingenuity reduced to frozen echoes. Jax straightened, a makeshift sealant gun in hand. Plan A was slingshotting around the cluster using the main drive's residual spin. But with the hit we took, that's toast. Backfire potential's too high, we'd shear off half the hull. He flashed a half smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. So, Plan B, I EVA out there, slap a patch on the breach, and you two fire the AUX thrusters and sink to nudge us free. Lena's brow furrowed. EVA in this debris soup? One stray pebble and you're paste. She leaned forward, her voice urgent but measured. We adapt. Use the buoy signal to triangulate a safe vector. I can recalibrate the sensors to map microdebris in real time. It's risky but calculated. Ilara waited, the weight of command pressing like the field's gravity. Jax argued for the quick fix, his bravado masking fear. Lena pushed for precision, her caution born of too many lab simulations gone awry. Tension coiled in the air, thicker than the recycled oxygen. Jax preps the patch. Lena, get me that vector. We move in 10. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, human grit forging a path where stars offered none. As Jax suited up, the ship groaned, a metallic shudder rippling through the deck. Alarms blared softly, a reminder of the cost. Time slipping away, air thinning. Ilara watched the asteroid shadows dance, a striking veil of dust catching the distant sun's light like fractured diamonds. They were beyond reach but not beyond reason. Not yet. Elena gripped the railing of the observation deck, her knuckles whitening as the helix shuddered again. The ship's hull groaned like an old beast protesting the strain, and through the reinforced viewport, the nebulous tendrils clawed closer, swirling violet gases laced with flecks of iridescent debris that sparked against the shields. Marcus was at her side, his toolkit slung over one shoulder, wiping grease from his hands on his jumpsuit. Shields are holding at 30%, he said, voice steady but edged with that familiar sarcasm. Any longer in this soup, and we'll be breathing vacuum with a side of cosmic radiation. Dr. Voss hovered behind the console, her fingers flying across the holographic display, eyes narrowed in concentration. She was the cautious one, always calculating odds, but now her usual reserve cracked. The particles are adaptive, she murmured, more to herself than them. They're not just eroding the shields, they're learning our frequency patterns. If we don't vent the auxiliary power core soon, it'll cascade into a full system failure. The stakes hung heavy in the air. One wrong move, and the helix would join the graveyard of probes they'd lost weeks ago, adrift in this uncharted void. Elena nodded, forcing her mind to the plan. They'd tried rerouting energy through the secondary arrays earlier, a human ingenuity hack Marcus had jury-rigged from old Earth mining tech. It had bought them time, flickering the shields back to life for a precious hour, but the nebula fought back harder, its glow intensifying like a predator sensing weakness. All right, team, she said, turning to face them. The fourth member, quiet navigator Kai, lingered in the doorway, his tablet clutched tight. He was the steady hand, mapping stars no one else could read, but even he looked frayed, dark circles under his eyes from endless shifts. We adapt or we die out here, Elena continued, her voice cutting through the hum of alarms. Marcus prepped the vent sequence. Lyra, sync it with the particle dispersal model, make it look like we're dumping waste, not power. Kai, plot us a vector out of the thickest clouds. No heroics, just get us breathing room. Marcus grinned faintly, clapping Kai on the back as they moved. See? Captain's got that grit. Universe throws a tantrum, we throw it right back. But as they scrambled into position, the first backfire hit. The vent ports jammed mid-cycle, a screech echoing through the corridors as debris clogged the lines. Voss swore under her breath, her calculations unraveling on the screen. It's binding to the alloys, faster than predicted. Elena's heart pounded. This wasn't just a delay. Losing the core meant no propulsion, no life support redundancy. The ship listed slightly, the nebula's pull tugging like invisible fingers. Marcus dove into the access panel, sparks flying as he wrestled with the manual override. Come on, you stubborn hunk of junk, he muttered, sweat beading on his brow. Elena knelt beside him, holding the light steady, her brave facade cracking just enough to let determination show. We've got this, she said, more for him than herself. In the distance, Kai's voice crackled over the comm. Vector locked, but we're drifting, 2 minutes till impact density. Voss patched in from the bridge, her tone urgent but controlled. I'm modulating the exhaust to mimic their frequency. It might fool them long enough. The idea was clever, born of late-night debates, humans turning alien aggression against itself, no techno-miracles, just raw adaptation. The ship bucked once more, lights dimming, but then a low whoosh filled the vents. The clog cleared in a burst of pressurized gas, and the core's hum stabilized, faint but alive. Elena exhaled, helping Marcus to his feet. The nebula receded slightly on the viewport, its glow dimming as Kai's course kicked in. But the cost lingered, shields at 15%, core integrity compromised. They'd bought time, not victory, and the void beyond whispered of worse to come. As the team regrouped, a faint signal pinged on Voss's console. Not distress but something deliberate, echoing from the nebula's heart. Whatever walked beyond reach was watching now, and humanity's steps had drawn it closer. The Odysseus bridge hummed with a low thrum of failing life support, air recyclers straining like overworked lungs. Outside the viewport, the nebula's tendrils swirled in iridescent fury, a cosmic storm that had swallowed their survey probe hours ago. She glanced at her crew, 3 souls in this tin can hurtling toward the unknown, and felt the weight of command settle heavier than the artificial gravity. Status Reyes? Ilara's voice cut through the tension, steady despite the knot in her gut. Lieutenant Marco Reyes, the engineer with a perpetual grease smudge on his cheek and, a wit sharp as a laser cutter, wiped sweat from his brow. Hull integrity at 62%, Captain. That plasma burst fried our secondary shields. We're venting atmosphere in the lower decks, slow but it's there. If we don't patch it soon, we'll be breathing vacuum by shift end. Dear. Lena Karov, the xenobiologist whose cautious optimism had kept them sane through a dozen dead-end worlds, leaned over her scanner. Her fingers danced across the interface, pulling up spectral readings from the nebula's heart. The anomaly inside is stabilizing, but our initial readings were off. It's not just gas and dust, there's structured energy like a web. If we push through, we might trigger a cascade. Ensign Tarek Hale, the youngest at 24, brave to the point of recklessness, paced behind them. His dark eyes flicked to the viewport, where the nebula's glow painted his face in shifting blues and violets. We can't turn back now. The Alliance fleet is months behind, and if this is the gateway they think it is, humanity gets first crack at whatever's beyond. Sitting here is suicide anyway. Ilara nodded, her mind racing through options. They'd come this far on a hunch, human grit pushing past the warnings of their alien allies, who deemed the nebula impassable. The Odyssey was humanity's boldest leap, a retrofitted explorer with jury-rigged FTL drives that no other species dared replicate. But boldness had limits, and the ship's alarms blared a reminder. All right, Plan B, she said, straightening. Reyes, you and Hale suit up for an EVA. Seal the lower vents manually, use the emergency welders. Lena, reroute power to the primaries, buy us time to scan a safe vector. Reyes shot her a grin, though it didn't reach his eyes. Aya, Capitul. Just don't let the universe eat us while we're out there. The airlock cycled with a hiss, and Ilara watched the feed as Reyes and Hale drifted into the void, tethers snaking behind them like lifelines. The nebula loomed, a living beast of ionized clouds that tugged at their suits with electromagnetic fingers. Lena worked beside her, murmuring calculations under her breath. "Vector holding," Lena said after a tense minute. "But the energy web, it's responding. Like it's aware." Ilara's pulse quickened. On the feed, Hale reached the first breach, his welder sparking blue against the hull. But then the nebula pulsed, a ripple of light that made the stars blur. Alarms wailed anew. "Captain?" Reyes's voice crackled over comms. "Something's pulling us, magnetic shear. Tethers won't hold." Hale's form twisted in the feed, his brave lunge toward the panel turning desperate as the nebula's grip tightened. Ilara slammed the override, firing thrusters in a blind burst. The ship lurched, but the pull intensified, dragging them deeper into the swirl. Lena's scanner beeped frantically. "It's locking on. The web's interfacing with our drive signature. Human tech is the key, but it's frying our systems." Ilara's hands flew across controls, diverting everything to countermeasures. Sweat stung her eyes. This wasn't a storm, it was a trap, ancient and hungry, latching onto the one thing that made them unique, their unyielding drive to push boundaries. On the feed, Hale's tether snapped with a silent whip. He tumbled free, a speck against the glowing maw. Reyes lunged, firing his suit's thruster in a reckless arc, but the nebula's light swallowed them both in a flash of violet. "Marco! Tarek!" Ilara's shout echoed in the empty bridge. Lena froze, her caution crumbling into horror. The ship shuddered, the web coiling tighter. Ilara gripped the console, her mind a whirlwind of grit and desperation. They weren't turning back, not while breath remained. But the cost was carving itself into her soul, one lost tether at a time. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening as the ship's alarms blared in staccato bursts. The void outside the viewport twisted like a living thing, stars smearing into hypnotic trails that pulled at her vision. "Status, Ramirez," she barked, her voice cutting through the din without a tremor, though her pulse hammered in her ears. Lieutenant Marco Ramirez hunched over his panel, sweat beading on his forehead under the flickering emergency lights. Hull integrity holding at 60%, but the warp field's destabilizing. That anomaly we punched through, it's like it latched on. Feedback loops everywhere. His fingers danced across the keys, rerouting power with the precision of a surgeon, but the readouts kept spiking red. Dr. Lena Core floated nearby, her tablet clutched like a shield, dark eyes scanning the data streams. Cautious as ever, she had argued against this shortcut through the uncharted nebula, but Ilara's grit had won out. Now, with the ship shuddering under invisible forces, Lena's voice stayed level. "The gravitational shear is amplifying. If we don't equalize the core soon, it'll tear us apart." Options. Ilara's mind raced, piecing together fragments from the logs. The anomaly wasn't just a hazard, it was a remnant of some ancient gate, humming with energy humans had only begun to fathom. No time for wonder. Vent the auxiliary plasma. It'll buy us a buffer, but it'll fry the secondary drives. We adapt or we die. Ramirez hesitated, his witty retort dying on his lips as another jolt rocked the bridge. Normally he'd crack a joke about humanity's knack for breaking the unbreakable, but the stakes pressed down like the nebula's own weight. Venting now. Hold on. The ship groaned as valves hissed open, expelling glowing plasma into the void. For a heartbeat, the twisting stars slowed, the alarms dipping to a wary whine. Ilara exhaled, pushing off toward the engineering hatch. "Lena with me. Marco, keep her steady. We're not ending our run here." They propelled through the corridors, zero-G making every movement a calculated glide. Sparks showered from a ruptured panel, and Ilara batted one away, her brave facade masking the burn of doubt. This expedition, humanity's bold leap beyond the reach, chasing signals that whispered of allies or threats, had already cost them the scout drone and half their supplies. Losing the crew would unravel it all. In the core chamber, the hum of the reactor vibrated through their suits. Lena tethered herself to a strut, plugging in her tablet. "The anomaly's resonance is syncing with our shields. Clever reroute. Use the human frequency modulator from the comms array. It's not designed for this, but its adaptive algorithms might disrupt the lock. Ilara nodded, pulling the bulky device from its locker, her muscles straining against the inertial dampener's flicker. Ramirez's voice crackled over the intercom. Bridge to core, another surge incoming. 30 seconds. They worked in tandem, Lena's cautious calibrations feeding into Ilara's determined thrusts of the modulator into the shield grid. Wires sparked, connections fused, but the device whirred to life, emitting a low pulse that rippled outward. The ship bucked violently, metal screeching as the anomaly fought back. Ilara braced against the console, tasting blood from a bitten lip. Then, silence. The twisting ceased, the stars snapping back into sharp focus. Clear, Ramirez reported, relief threading his words. We're drifting free, but drives are toast. We'll limp to the nearest relay on thrusters. Lena disconnected, her expression a mix of exhaustion and quiet triumph. It followed us, Captain. That thing, whatever it is, it's not letting go easy. We bought time, but the cost. Ilara straightened, wiping her face. The secondary drives gone meant delays, resupplies they couldn't afford, and a signal flare that might draw unwanted eyes from the uncharted fringes. Yet, as the ship stabilized, she felt the pull of what lay ahead, the universe bending toward humanity's unyielding stride. They pressed on, scarred but unbroken. The dim glow of the emergency lights cast long shadows across the bridge of the Odyssey, turning the once pristine consoles into jagged silhouettes. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrest of her chair, her knuckles white against the worn leather. The ship's AI had just reported another cascade failure in the warp core, third one this shift, and the readings showed the anomaly field tightening like a noose around them. They were light years from the nearest relay, adrift in the void where stars blurred into streaks of forgotten light. Status, Lieutenant Reyes? Ilara's voice cut through the hum of failing systems, steady despite the knot in her gut. She glanced at her XO, a wiry man with a perpetual squint from too many hours staring at sensor feeds. Reyes didn't look up from his panel, fingers flying across the holographic keys. Containment holding at 60%, ma'am. But the field's modulating, it's adapting to our countermeasures. If we push the core harder, we risk a breach. He paused, wiping sweat from his brow. The air recyclers were sputtering, carrying the faint tang of ozone. Engineering screaming for more time, but we don't have it. Ilara nodded, her mind racing through options they'd already burned. The anomaly, a swirling vortex of quantum distortions, had ambushed them en route to the Proxima outpost, drawn perhaps by the ship's experimental drive signature. No warnings, no hails. Just this relentless pull that scrambled their NAV systems and drained power like a leech. They'd lost 2 crew in the initial surge, good people who'd been sealing a hull breach when the field spiked. The cost weighed on her, a quiet ache beneath the adrenaline. Get me Dr. Hale on comms, she said, activating the bridge intercom. The scientist appeared on the secondary screen, her face framed by the cluttered lab behind her. Wires snaking across workbenches, holographic models flickering erratically. Captain, the spectral analysis is conclusive, Hale said, her voice clipped but calm, eyes bright with that relentless curiosity that had gotten them this far. The anomaly's not random, it's resonant with our drive harmonics. Like it's echoing us. Ilara leaned forward. Echoing? Meaning what? It's learning from us. Precisely. Every adjustment we make, it mirrors and amplifies. We need to disrupt the resonance without overloading the core. Hale's fingers traced a glowing equation in the air. I've got a theory. Invert the phase emitters in the auxiliary bays. It could create a feedback loop, push the field back. Reyes snorted softly. That sounds like jury-rigging a bomb, Doc. One wrong pulse and we're vapor. It's a risk, Hale admitted, meeting Ilara's gaze through the feed. But sitting here we're done anyway. I can rig it from here if you give the green light. The ship shuddered then, a deep groan echoing through the decks as another wave hit. Alarms blared briefly before Ilara silenced them with a swipe. She thought of the crew below, engineers patching conduits, medics tending burns, relying on her call. Grit had carried humanity this far, from scraping colonies on Mars to piercing the galaxy's edge. But grit alone wouldn't save them now, it needed a spark of madness. Do it, Elara said. Reyes, coordinate with engineering. Divert all non-essentials to the base. And Hale, make it count. As the doctor nodded and cut the feed, Elara felt the weight settle deeper. The view screen showed the anomaly now, a shimmering maw of indigo and black swallowing light hole. It wasn't just a hazard, it was a mirror reflecting their desperation back at them. She stood, rolling her shoulders against the strain. All hands, this is the captain. We're fighting smart today. Hold the line. Down in the auxiliary bays, sparks flew as Hale's team jury-rigged the emitters. The air hummed with tension, tools clanging against metal in the confined space. Midshipman Kira Patel, the youngest on board with her quick hands and quicker doubts, connected the final relay. "This better work, Doc," she muttered, voice barely audible over the whine of charging coils. "I didn't sign up to be space dust." Hale glanced up, her braids swinging as she calibrated the inverter. "None of us did, Kira. But humans don't fold, we adapt." She hit the activation sequence and the bays lit up with a pulsing blue glow. Energy surged through the ship, a vibration that rattled teeth. On the bridge, the anomaly reacted instantly. The field warped, tendrils lashing out like seeking fingers, probing the Odyssey's shields. Reyes cursed under his breath. "Shields at 40%, it's pushing back." Elara braced as the deck tilted. "Status on the loop?" "Building." Hale's voice crackled over the comm. 10 seconds. 5. The ship bucked violently, a screech of tearing metal from somewhere aft. Elara's heart pounded, visions of the lost crew flashing. Faces she'd shared meals with, stories swapped in the mess. Then, a sudden hush fell, broken only by the steady beep of stabilizing readouts. The anomaly flickered, its edges fraying like smoke in wind. Slowly, agonizingly, it receded, the stars sharpening into focus on the view screen. Cheers erupted from the bridge crew, ragged and real, but Elara held up a hand, scanning the damage logs. Power reserves were critically low, and scans showed microfractures in the hull, repairs that would take weeks, stranding them from the outpost. "We did it," Reyes said, slumping back, a grin cracking his fatigue. "Barely." Elara allowed herself a breath, the knot easing just a fraction. Barely. Selena gripped the railing of the observation deck, her knuckles whitening as the Helix's hull groaned under another pulse from the anomaly. The swirling vortex outside the viewport, a maelstrom of ionized gas and gravitational whips, hadn't let up in hours, its tendrils lashing at the ship's shields like living flames. Marco was already at the auxiliary console, his fingers flying over the patched-together interface, sweat beading on his forehead despite the recycled air's chill. "Shields at 30%, he muttered, not looking up. "If we reroute the auxiliary power from life support, we might buy another cycle. But it'll get cold in here fast." Lila hovered behind him, her tablet clutched like a shield, eyes darting between the readouts and the viewport. She'd been the one to insist they approach the anomaly closer, arguing its energy signature could revolutionize warp drives. Now, with the engines stuttering and the crew's oxygen reserves dipping, caution felt like her middle name carved in regret. "We can't risk it," she said, voice steady but thin. "The filters are already straining. One more hit, and we're breathing our own exhaust." Elena pushed off the railing, her boots magnetizing to the deck with a soft click. She'd led expeditions through asteroid belts and black hole fringes, but this felt different, personal, like the universe was testing how far grit could stretch before it snapped. "Options?" she asked, keeping her tone even, though her mind raced through the dwindling list. Marco leaned back, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. A wry grin cracked his face, the kind that said he was about to pull a rabbit from a hat made of scrap. "I've got a half-baked one. Remember that salvage Xeno probe we snagged from the Outer Rim? Its hull alloy resonates with this crap, could fashion a makeshift baffle to deflect the pulses. But we'd have to spacewalk out there, weld it on manually. In this soup? It's suicide with a side of sparks." Lila's eyes widened, but she didn't flinch. "The probe's in the lower bay. I can prep the schematics in 5. But, Elena, the suits are rated for vacuum, not this electromagnetic storm. One wrong move, and we're the first humans to become cosmic dust," Elena finished, nodding. She glanced at the viewport, where the anomaly's core pulsed like a heartbeat, mocking their fragility. The stakes had never been abstract. 2 crew lost already to an earlier surge, their memorials etched into the bulkhead. No speeches needed, everyone felt it. Suit up. Marco, you're on the welt. Lila, monitor from the airlock. I'll cover the tether. They moved like a well-oiled machine, years of drills kicking in amid the chaos. In the prep bay, Elena helped Marco into his suit, the bulky fabric hissing as it sealed. His voice crackled over the comms, laced with that irrepressible wit. If I fry out there, tell my poker buddies I went out swinging. And Elena? Don't let Lila calculate the odds, she'll talk us out of it. Focus, Elena replied, but a ghost of a smile tugged at her lips. Lila was already at the airlock panel, her cautious nature channeling into precision, fingers adjusting the tether's tension with surgical care. The outer hatch cycled open, and the storm hit like a wall, sparks dancing across the hull, the anomaly's roar vibrating through their bones. Marco propelled himself along the ship's spine, arc welder in hand, the probe fragment gleaming under his helmet light. Elena floated nearby, rifle slung for any debris, her heart pounding in rhythm with the pulses. Halfway to the shield emitter, a tendril lashed out, grazing Marco's suit. Alarms blared in their ears, his vitals spiked. I'm good, burned like hell but holding, he grunted, voice tight. He reached the mount, sparks flying as the alloy kissed metal, the baffle taking shape amid the fury. Lila's voice cut through the static from inside. Pulse incoming, 30 seconds. It's destabilizing the tether anchors. Elena fired her maneuvering thrusters, closing the gap. Pull back now, Marco. We adapt or we die. He didn't argue, welding the final seam with a flourish. The baffle hummed to life just as the next wave crested, its resonance scattering the energy like chaff in wind. The ship shuddered but held. They reeled in, breathless, the viewport showing the anomaly's fury bending around them for the first time. Back inside, seals hissing shut, Elena stripped off her helmet, the air thick with relief and the faint tang of ozone. Marco slumped against the wall, grinning through the pain. Told you, human stubbornness beats physics every time. But Lila's tablet beeped ominously, her face paling as she scanned the logs. The baffle's integration had worked, but it drained the core reserves faster than projected. They had propulsion now, but fuel for the return? Barely. The universe had followed them this far, drawn by their audacity, but the cost lingered in every flickering light. Elena gripped the console edge as the Odyssey as hull groaned under another pulse from the nebula. Sparks danced across the panels, and the air hummed with the acrid tang of overheating circuits. Marcus, talk to me, how much time before the core fries? Marcus wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers flying over the jury-rigged diagnostics. The wiry engineer flashed a grin that didn't reach his eyes. 10 minutes tops. That last surge from the anomaly cooked our stabilizers. If we don't vent the excess plasma soon, we're ghost ship material. He yanked a lever, rerouting power with a hiss of escaping steam. His wit usually lightened these moments, but today it felt like a shield cracking under strain. Lila hovered behind them, her tablet clutched like a talisman. The scientist's cautious nature had saved them before, spotting patterns in the nebula's chaos that no one else saw. But now her voice trembled. The readings, they're shifting. The pulses are aligning with our exhaust vents. It's not random, it's like the nebula's learning our rhythm. She tapped the screen, zooming in on a fractal swirl of ionized gas, a vortex that mimicked the ship's own propulsion signature. One wrong move, and it'd pull them into its heart, shredding the colony pod they towed behind. Elena nodded, her mind racing through the fragments of their failed plan. Earlier they'd tried shielding the vents with auxiliary drones, but the nebula had adapted, frying the bots mid-deployment and leaving them blind. Now, with oxygen reserves dipping and the pod's cryosleepers depending on them, retreat wasn't an option. The universe had watched humanity push this far, beyond the reach of safe jumps into uncharted voids, and Elena be damned if they'd falter now. Alright, new play. Marcus, can we reverse the plasma flow? Use it to disrupt the nebula's sink. He paused, eyes narrowing as he traced the schematics. Reverse it? That's like turning a river upstream with a spoon. But if we sink it to Lila's pattern, maybe we can create a feedback loop. forced the anomaly to choke on its own echo. His hands blurred again, splicing cables with the precision of someone who'd patched hull breaches on a dozen frontier runs. A spark bit his knuckle, but he didn't flinch. Lila leaned in, her caution yielding to urgency. "I'll calibrate the frequencies. If we match the pulse rate exactly, it might destabilize the alignment. But Elena, the risk, if it backfires, we'll amplify the pull instead." Her fingers hesitated over the input, the weight of 5,000 souls in cryo pressing on her. Elena met her gaze, steady as the stars they'd left behind. "We adapt or we end. Hit it." The command echoed in the dim bridge, where red emergency lights painted their faces in stark relief. Marcus initiated the reversal with a grunt, the ship shuddering as plasma churned backward through the lines. Alarms wailed, but he silenced them one by one, his banter forgotten in the grind. Lila fed the data stream, her updates clipped, pulse matching 80%, holding. The nebula outside the viewport twisted, its glowing tendrils coiling tighter as if offended by the intrusion. Then, a jolt rocked them harder than before. Consoles flickered, and for a heartbeat, Elena thought they'd lost it. The pod's tether strained, visible through the rear feed, its habitat swaying like a pendulum in the void. But Marcus hooped, punching the air. "Feedback's building. It's fighting back, but we're giving it indigestion." Lila's tablet beeped triumphantly. "Destabilizing, the sink's breaking. Pull us out now." Elena slammed the thrusters, the Odyssey lurching free as the nebula convulsed, expelling a burst of harmless static. They cleared the edge, stars re-emerging like old friends, but the victory tasted bittersweet. Scans showed the pod intact, yet their fuel cells were down 30% from the strain, enough to delay docking at the nearest relay by weeks. Marcus slumped into his chair, nursing burned fingers. "Clever adaptation, huh? Universe followed us out here, guess it wanted a real chase." Elena allowed a small smile, watching the nebula recede, a beautiful, treacherous reminder that every step beyond reach came with scars. Lila busied herself logging the data, her caution already plotting safer paths ahead. They'd earned this breath, but the void whispered of more trials, and humanity's grit would meet them head-on. The dim glow of the emergency lights flickered across the bridge, casting long shadows that danced like specters over the consoles. Captain Elena Reyes gripped the armrest of her chair, her knuckles white against the worn leather. The ship's hull groaned under the relentless assault of the nebulous plasma storms, each wave sending tremors through the deck. Her team, Dr. Kai Voss, the brilliant but reckless engineer, and Lieutenant Mira Chen, steady and unyielding, huddled around the central holo display, their faces etched with exhaustion. "Structural integrity at 47%, Kai muttered, his fingers flying over the interface. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his eyes burned with that familiar fire, the one that had gotten them this far into uncharted space. "If we don't reroute power from the auxiliary cores, the next hit will breach the outer hull." Elena nodded, her voice calm despite the knot in her stomach. "Do it. Mira, keep eyes on the sensors. Any sign of the fleet?" Myra's gaze didn't leave the flickering readouts. "They're holding formation 2 clicks out, but the interference is scrambling comms. The Krell Vanguard is closing, ETA 15 minutes if they push through the storm." The Krell. Those biomechanical horrors from the outer rim, their ships fused with living tendrils that adapted to any threat. Humanity's bold leap beyond the reach had drawn their attention, mistaking exploration for invasion. Now the Odyssey was the last human vessel standing, a lone beacon in the chaos, carrying the prototype drive that could open wormholes to new worlds, or doom them all if it fell into enemy hands. Elena stood, pacing the narrow bridge. The air hummed with the scent of ozone and overheated circuits. She remembered the launch from Seoul, the cheers echoing through the bays as they slipped past the asteroid belts. Ingenuity had been their creed, humans with no natural armor or psychic gifts like the other species, but with grit that bent the stars to their will. Yet here, adrift in the nebula's heart, that grit felt like a fragile thread. A sharp jolt rocked the ship, alarms blaring. "Breach in Sector 7. Mira shouted, her hands slamming the override. Bulkhead sealed with a hiss, but the damage was done, vital systems offline, oxygen reserves dipping. Kai cursed under his breath, diving into the access panel. Sparks flew as he jury-rigged the conduits, his hands steady even as the ship listed. Elena, we can't fight them head-on. The drive's our only shot. Overcharge it, punch a hole through the nebula. But it'll fry the engines. One way out. She met his eyes, seeing the weight of it. The drive wasn't just tech, it was their legacy woven from human dreams and failures. Activating it meant stranding them light years from home, no return ticket. But surrender? That meant the Krell claiming humanity's spark, twisting it into their endless war machine. Prep the sequence, Elena said, her decision settling like iron in her chest. Mira, plot the vector. Aim for the fleet's flank, buy them time. As Kai initiated the overload, the holo-display lit up with a cascade of data, the nebula's swirling vortices rendered in stark blues and violets. The ship shuddered again, closer this time, the Krell's shadow looming on the edge of sensors. Myra's fingers traced the controls, her voice low. Trajectory locked. Firing in 3, 2. The drive hummed to life, a deep vibration that resonated through their bones. Energy built, coiling like a storm within the hull. Elena braced, whispering a silent vow to the stars. We'd come this far, we wouldn't break now. The Odyssey surged forward, the wormhole rift tearing open ahead, a jagged maw of light against the nebula's fury. Alarms wailed as the first Krell tendrils lashed out, grazing the shields. Kai yelled over the din, hold her steady. But the ship bucked, consoles sparking, and Elena felt the cost in every fiber. The engines whining to their limit, the air growing thin. They burst through, the rift snapping shut behind them. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of venting plasma. The bridge was a wreck, smoke curling from panels. Mira slumped against her station, a gash on her forehead. Kai coughed, wiping blood from his lip. We made it. But the drive, it spent. Elena pushed to her feet, scanning the readouts. The fleet signals pierced the static, relief flooding through. But the nebula's edge loomed on the view screen, scarred and unstable, a reminder of the path they'd carved. The Krell would follow, adapted and relentless. Humanity's walk beyond the reach had ignited the universe, and now the fire spread, with them at its heart. Yet as the fleet closed in, Elena allowed a faint smile. They'd adapted, turned desperation into a weapon. The cost was high, stranded, battered, but the stars ahead gleamed with possibility. The universe had followed, now it was time to lead. The stars stretched out like an endless veil, pierced only by the faint glow of the relay beacon they jury-rigged from scraps. Captain Alara Voss wiped sweat from her brow, her hands still trembling from the final alignment. Beside her, Jax, the wiry engineer with his perpetual squint, double-checked the connections, his fingers dancing over exposed wires that hummed with borrowed power. It's holding, he muttered, voice rough as gravel. But if that plasma storm hits before the signal locks? Lyra, the xenobiologist who'd argued them into this madness, leaned against the console, her sharp eyes scanning the readouts. She was the cautious one, always calculating odds, but now her face held a quiet resolve. It will lock. We've come too far for her. The three of them, humans, stubborn and unyielding, had pushed the derelict ship, the Odyssey's echo, through the void's unforgiving fringes. What started as a routine survey had unraveled into a fight for survival. A rogue asteroid field laced with quantum anomalies, shredding their hull and stranding them light years from aid. No grand villain, just the universe's indifference demanding they adapt or perish. The storm was closing in, a roiling wall of ionized gas that could fry their circuits in seconds. Their first plan, to limp to the nearest colony, had failed spectacularly when the engines seized, forcing a desperate pivot. Jax's ingenuity had salvaged the beacon, a patchwork of human tech and scavenged alien relics, broadcasting a distress call laced with coordinates. But the real gamble was the message, not just a plea but an invitation. Show them we're here, Ilara had said, her brave streak shining through the fear. And that we're worth finding. Alarms blared, sharp and insistent. The storm's edge brushed their shields, sending sparks across the deck. Lyra gripped the armrest, her mind racing through failure modes. Signal strength at 80%. We need 90 or it's useless. Jax cursed under his breath, rerouting power from life support. a risky move that dimmed the lights and chilled the air. Ilara steadied him with a hand on his shoulder, their camaraderie a silent anchor. No speeches, just the shared grit of doing what had to be done. Then, a ping. Faint at first like a whisper in the static, but growing. Readouts flickered, incoming response. Not from the colonies, but something else, vast, coordinated. The universe's edge, where humanity had dared to walk, was answering. Ships, dozens of them, alien silhouettes emerging from the storm's fury, drawn by the beacon's defiant pulse. They weren't rescuers in the human sense. They were observers, probes, a network Ilara's team had unwittingly activated during their scramble. The lead vessel, a sleek crystalline form, docked with a gentle thud that vibrated through the hull. Airlocks cycled, and figures stepped aboard, tall ethereal beings with skin like shifting nebulae, their eyes wide with curiosity. No hostility, only questions, conveyed through holographic bursts that Lyra translated on the fly. You reached beyond. Why? Ilara met their gaze, unflinching. Because we could. And because alone it's not enough. Jax snorted, wiping his hands on his jumpsuit, while Lyra nodded, her caution yielding to wonder. The aliens didn't save them out of pity. They integrated the Echo into their fleet, sharing schematics that mended the engines in hours. Human grit had sparked alliance, turning isolation into interconnection. As the combined armada surged forward, the storm breaking behind them, Ilara lingered at the viewport. The cost lingered too, scars on the ship, exhaustion etched into their faces, and the knowledge that their beyond was now shared. Jax clapped her shoulder. Worth it? Lyra asked softly. Ilara smiled, the stars brighter now. Always. The universe followed, not as conquerors but as partners in the walk ahead.